Okay, so has anyone here heard the idea of companion planting?
Yep.
Okay, so is it worth it? And to me, and growing at a very large scale, I was familiar with companion planting. I never used it because you just can't scale it up. But I do think that there's quite a bit of truth to the whole idea about it. And if you're at a level of gardening where you kind of want to experiment with it, I think there's something to it. I don't think it's necessarily anything you have to do. But there are some, theories to think about when along the lines of companion planting. But beets, carrots, and cabbage family generally do not help the crop that follows them. Based on the residue that they leave in the soil or the nutrients that they take out of the soil, they generally don't make the soil better. They don't necessarily hurt the soil, but the crop doesn't necessarily get planted and excels because that plant was there before it. At the same time, onions, lettuce, and squash family generally do make the soil better for the plant that follows it. So, and one of the reasons that they've kind of theorized that this happens is a lot of times these different families, the way they feed, they use, they're able to kind of get at nutrients in the soil that other plants aren't able to, so they make them available in the soil for the plant that follows. So, just to kind of keep in mind, onion, lettuce, and squash, as long as you're not planting in the same family, your plant will be okay that you're planted there. Please.
Before you said that onion family suppresses
Weeds.
Now, how did they distinguish between weeds and lettuce? I mean, are they suppress germination generally, or just specific
Weakly.
things?
So it's a very weak, the term is alleliopathic, where they're able to kind of suppress the weeds. I think it suppresses germination. So direct seeding something directly after onions, I probably wouldn't do it, but I'd transplant.
Yeah.
Once the plant is up and growing, it's going to be in great shape.
Do you do any work with no-till gardening?
I did quite a lot.
Okay.
And on a large scale. I tilled as rarely as possible. And I like that idea because anytime you disturb the soil, and like if you're using a big rototiller, you're burning off your own organic matter. And so I hated to do that because I was trying to make money, and it's like you burn off organic matter and you won't grow nice produce. So.
Yeah,
Can you break that down to no-tilling?
Say again?
Explain the no-tilling.
Yeah, so tilling is basically anytime you mix up the soil. But anytime you mix up the soil, your soil is, the base of it is sand. But the rest of it is going to be decayed leaves, it's going to be other plant parts, it's going to be dead insects, it's going to be all kinds of stuff that makes that black dirt. Anytime you expose that dirt to the oxygen in the atmosphere, the oxygen starts burning it off or breaking it down. So the least amount you can do to mix up your dirt, the better your soil will stay. And that doesn't mean you can't do anything with your soil, just keeping it in mind, like I've seen farmers and gardeners who till their garden up 3-4 times a season, and you're just burning up your own soil when you do that. So
killing off
earthworms.
Yeah, and there's all the beneficial
It's
micro and little creatures in there. And I know UI recommends maybe 2 to 3 years tilling. I mean, it can really be detrimental to your garden.
Right, I agree.
We don't have time to cover it now, but in a later workshop, we'll go over our method of building up the soil, and no-tilling is the critical part of that. But there are other reasons why it's critical, which is that our method uses a lot of adding of microbes through compost tea
Mhm.
and building the structure for the microbes to proliferate and be healthy, which is another amendment called biochar. So soil building is really important, but the no-tilling is absolutely essential, because if you start tilling it, then all the little homes and all the little connections,
Mhm.
it's like a little cities of microbes that down there, they all get crushed by the, they just get destroyed. So it's for if the microbes, see the way our method is, the microbes in our soil, if you do it right, they do the work so we don't have to do it.
Mhm.
So how do you loosen the surface when you go to put in your next plants?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just the good old fashioned digging fork, to where you can just put it in, step on it, and rock it. And that's really all you have to do, to like loosen the soil back
Yeah,
up, you know,
yeah.
but, and I'm not 100% against tilling, I own a tiller, but I don't use it every time I plant. So, please.
In a situation where, again, smaller garden, and you're battling weeds, I found what I was doing was essentially tilling the entire small plot, because I wanted to get all the weeds and the weed roots out. And it struck me, the no-till issue is it's sometimes better to let the weeds grow if you have your plants bigger, rather
It's
than
true.
clean it,
Yeah.
so that it's all nice and neat.
It's not as pretty, I mean, it's not Martha Stewart to have, these weeds growing there. But I knew a lot of commercial growers who would say weeds are a cover crop. They're not necessarily what you want to eat right there, but if they don't go to seed, they're really not hurting anything. And if they're not competing for sunlight with, let's say you have tomatoes and weeds, the weed is blocking out the sun for the tomato, then they're competing. But if the tomato is growing well and the weed is under it, who cares? It really doesn't bother.
So the weed isn't taking essential nutrients from the tomato or whatever?
No. The only thing you have to worry about with a weed that's not competing is don't let it go to seed, because weed seeds stay in your soil for 50 years. And, the weeds that you're weeding in this upcoming season could seriously be 50 years old. So you'll never eliminate them from your soil, and it's almost kind of like trying to clean the Aegean stables if you're going to take up that fight. You don't have to,
Dandelions set nitrogen like legumes do, don't they?
They do. Yes,
So-
dandelions are, and
And
they're
clover, right.
such a short-lived crop
Just
that
get them before they turn white.
that's it. And they're not Martha Stewart. They're not the photogenic garden. They aren't hurting anything, really.
And they're great for bees.
They're great for bees. They have a great taproot that busts up your soil. I mean, there's
Just
more
mow
benefit. Pardon?
Just mow them
Just
before
mow
they
'em.
turn
They're
white.
very
It's
good
true.
for you. You should.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about bindweed?
Bindweed is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because bindweed, the nature of it is to compete with anything that it can grow over. So I would say with bindweed, if you have the opportunity to just kind of cut it off at the surface and then get it out of your garden, you certainly don't want to let it go to seed, but the problem with bindweed is just that it crawls over everything and chokes stuff out.
Yeah,
Well,
You
but are there, when you have an infestation, what do you suggest doing?
I suggest cutting it at the surface when it's young. And, when I'm weeding, I generally use long-handled, so you can just kind of sit and sweep. Any weed that you can hit when it's small, it'll grow back in a couple weeks or, whatever, but if your soil, going with the understanding that your soil's already full of weed seeds, you just can't not deal with it unless you're Roundupping stuff. So, and I don't think anyone here is really into that, so.
Are there any cover crops that might get the
Keep
upper
it down.
hand?
Yeah, so if you were, say, in October, early October, late September, if you were to plant a stand of what's called winter rye, winter rye is one of those crops that the residues in the ground will keep weeds down for, several weeks of the first, part of the season. So that's the only one that I really used though to keep weeds down. My big problem on my farm was thistle. I had like the spiny stuff. And if I had an area that was I was seeing a lot of thistle, I'd do a real heavy stand of winter rye, let it grow for the whole autumn. Winter would kill it, and then, come spring, I would just kind of mow the top and, get ready to plant in around it. So, but winter rye is a good one. And you could probably get that from Johnny's as well.
You can also mulch.
Yeah, you could mulch. I mean, for people who like mulching, I mean, I think it's a great way to build your soil and, just kind of add, if you've got an area with bindweed, covering the area in wood chips or some kind of mulch and then planting through it, the mulch will keep the bindweed down and the plant will be fine too.
Right.
And then whatever you're mulching with is gonna make your soil better. So, please.
What are your thoughts on landscaping fabric?
If I have I'm a fan actually. If I have an area that has like a heavy grass up, like kind of infestation or thistle, something like that, and I just need to keep it down, I don't have a problem with having a season with landscape fabric, punching a hole in the landscape fabric to place the plants, and letting that landscape fabric really like kind of choke out whatever was underneath. So if you've got, say, a raised bed or a garden area that's just overtaken with grass, and those roots are so hard you can't even get it out, if you mow it down, landscape fabric it, plant where you want to, but just let the landscape fabric, kind of break that down. It works well. And some people like to do the same with a biodegradable plastic layer or a regular plastic layer. I have no problem with regular plastic as long as you get it out and, dispose of it. But, any kind of barrier like that I think works well.
Newspaper works.
Newspaper works too. I mean, if you can cover it up with a mulch and, and that breaks down after a little while too. Anybody else? Please.
How do you incorporate worm casings into your soil?
I-
Like should you just put them on top, or should they be worked in?
Yeah, I would add them to the top and I'd work them in real shallowly.
Just
Um,
your hand?
Yeah, with your hand or, with a rake, but, that top layers of soil is often like the most biologically active layer. That's where a lot of the action's happening, and so that's a great spot.